You walk past 100 yards of open bank to reach a single overhanging tree at the edge of the water. And the moment you drop a line under it, you start catching bluegill. You move back down the bank to a spot that looks identical, except there is no tree. Same depth, same water temperature, same time of day, and the bites stop. An hour later, you walk back to that tree and it's still producing. Most anglers treat this as a lucky spot without understanding why it works. And that gap is what keeps them from finding the next one on water they've never fished before. The tree is not the luck. The tree is a delivery system. Here is the mechanism. Every overhanging tree is continuously dropping material into the water beneath it. Insects losing their grip on leaves and bark, caterpillars falling on silk threads, beetles knocked loose by wind, ants traveling branch tips and going into the water instead of back to the tree. This is not occasional. On a warm summer day, a mature tree overhanging a pond or creek bank can introduce dozens of terrestrial insects into the water directly below it every hour, without pause. Bluegill and other panfish in still water spend much of their feeding time watching the surface for exactly this kind of input. A tree that delivers it reliably becomes a feeding station they return to throughout the day. The reason fish concentrate under an overhanging tree rather than spreading along the whole bank is that the food delivery is precisely located. An insect that falls from a branch lands within a few feet of where it was sitting. Wind can carry a small insect a short distance, but the delivery zone for a tree is essentially the width of its canopy projected onto the water beneath it. Often a strip only 10 to 20 feet wide along the bank. Beyond that strip, the bank may look identical, but the food input drops to nearly nothing. Fish that have learned this pattern hold in the delivery zone, not scattered randomly along adjacent water. If this kind of field-based reading is useful to you, a like helps more anglers find it. Wind shifts the delivery zone, and understanding this changes where you actually position your bait. On a still day, food falls straight down into the water directly beneath the canopy. On a day with a steady breeze blowing from the bank toward open water, small insects get carried a few feet further out before they land, shifting the productive strip slightly away from the bank. A wind blowing in the opposite direction, pushing from open water toward the bank, can drive insects against the trunk and roots before they reach the water at all, which temporarily shuts down the surface delivery even when the tree itself is full of food. Reading the wind before you cast tells you where the zone actually is on that specific morning. Different species use the same delivery zone differently, and knowing this changes where your bait goes. Bluegill typically hold in the upper water column directly beneath the canopy, watching the surface and striking as insects land or begin to sink. Bass tend to hold slightly deeper and further back from the immediate strike zone, using the shadow and structure of the tree itself as cover while staying close enough to intercept anything that gets past the bluegill above them. Catfish are generally less influenced by surface delivery than panfish, and may hold near the roots and submerged structure at the trunk base, where sunken material accumulates, though their relationship to this specific structure is less predictable than bluegill or bass positioning. But what's actually falling from a tree changes month to month, and so does how much of it there is. And most anglers fishing these spots have never thought about what the tree above them is doing at that exact time of year. The same tree produces very different amounts of surface food in June versus September, and some trees are more productive than others entirely because of what they host. Tree species matters more than most freshwater anglers realize. Oaks, willows, and mulberries consistently produce high volumes of insect and caterpillar activity through summer, with each delivering surface food at different points in the season. Willows overhanging water are particularly reliable because their drooping branches create natural insect highways directly to the surface, and their soft leaf structure hosts aphid and small caterpillar populations that stay active from late spring through early fall. Deciduous trees with visible pest pressure, showing leaf damage from caterpillars or beetles, are often the single most productive spots on a pond for surface feeding, because high insect density on the tree translates directly to high delivery into the water below. Time of day shapes how active the surface delivery feeding is, separate from how much food is falling. Terrestrial insects become most active as surface temperatures warm in late morning, which means surface delivery from a tree peaks roughly between mid-morning and early afternoon on warm days. Later in the morning than most anglers arrive, and earlier than most give up on midday fishing. The first hour of light is often slow at a tree spot specifically, because overnight temperatures have cooled the insects into inactivity. By mid-morning, as the air under the canopy warms, insects start moving and falling, and the feeding activity below often intensifies noticeably over the span of an hour. Reading a tree spot before casting is faster and more precise than most anglers bother with. Look first at whether the canopy actually extends over the water. Some trees lean over the bank but have their mass back from the edge, delivering most of their material to dry ground rather than the water surface. Look for surface rings directly under the hanging branches, even small ones, which indicate active surface feeding happening right now. Check the wind direction relative to the bank and adjust mentally where the landing strip will be. If the water below the canopy is flat and still with no rings, fish may be there but not actively feeding at the surface, and a slightly sunken presentation closer to mid-column may be more productive than a surface-level one. Presentation under an overhanging tree should mimic what the water is already receiving, which means a small bait fished at or just below the surface, with as little weight as possible while still making the cast. Heavy tackle crashes through the surface and puts down fish that were watching it. A light hook with a small piece of natural bait or a small rubber worm, cast to land softly at the edge of the canopy shadow, then allowed to settle naturally the way a real insect would, consistently outperforms anything fished with a sinker and bobber in these spots. The delivery the tree creates is gentle and vertical. Your presentation should be as close to that as you can manage. Here is where this system stops working. A tree with no leaf cover, dormant in winter, or dead, still provides shade and structure, but eliminates the food delivery entirely. A period of heavy rain washes material off the tree rapidly, but also muddies the water enough that surface visibility for feeding fish is reduced, often shutting down this specific type of feeding even as the rain delivers food. Prolonged high wind, above about 15 to 20 miles per hour, makes insect activity erratic and inconsistent enough that the reliable delivery pattern breaks down. Old pond anglers who fished the same water across many seasons developed strong preferences for specific trees. Not all overhanging trees equally, but particular ones that they had learned produced season after season. They noticed that certain trees held active insects most consistently, that willows and oaks outperformed maples and pines for this kind of fishing, and that a tree showing leaf damage was often worth investigating specifically. They were reading an insect density indicator without having a name for it. What they understood intuitively was that the tree itself was part of the fishing system, not just the water below it. The field checklist. Confirm the canopy actually extends over the water before casting. Check wind direction and adjust where the delivery zone falls. Look for surface rings indicating active feeding already underway. Use the lightest possible presentation and land it softly at the canopy edge. Oaks, willows, mulberries, and any tree with visible insect damage are the most reliable producers. Arrive by mid-morning. Insect activity follows air temperature more than sunrise. Skip dormant or dead trees, adjust expectations in heavy rain, and reduce enthusiasm in sustained high wind. Has there been a tree on your home water that always produces, and you've never fully thought through why? Subscribe to Traditional Angling. Next time, we look at what happens to those same fish when the weather changes overnight.